Most international and local media congratulate South Africa for hosting a successful World Cup, both logistically and in terms of the human spirit, the warmth of the people. What are your assessments?
Well, I think the first lesson we should learn from this is precisely following from your lead story. Government luminaries have to sort of recognize that while the rest of us minions have to pay for the tickets for the games that we go to, they can't be using our public money to enjoy themselves. Now, I think that notwithstanding, I think, everyone's been congratulatory about the fact that we've actually delivered a fairly exceptional World Cup. There have been problems, of course there have been. Journalists have been attacked, there's been incidents of crime, but they've been relatively minor in the larger pool of successes that we've had. South Africans have come together to a degree. I think that's also something, even though symbolic, it's something we should celebrate. But I think that there is something underlying this. Let's take 1995, 1996, the Rugby World Cup. And you've had this sort of ephemeral outpouring of commonality, of emotion, of being together. And of course it lasted a very short while, and there's a reason why. I think firstly, South Africans didn't bother to get to know each other beyond that period. Secondly, there was no real material transfer of resources, assets, skills, social capital development, so to speak, so that those who were not participating in the rest of our society have the means, the tools, and the ability to do so. And I think that's what has left that experience, rather worse for wear. Now, there's been comparisons made about that experience and this, and I think essentially it's a false comparison. It's a false comparison because the scales are completely different, the size of it is different, and what we've had to do this time round, as opposed to a decade ago, is on a completely different agenda altogether.
Certainly the Soccer World Cup is a much bigger tournament, and the infrastructure needed was a lot more extensive and expensive. But some people would say the higher you go, the stakes are higher, and so there is a definite challenge to do a lot more. And the South African authorities have risen to the occasion. Just look at the issue of crime and these impromptu World Cup courts that have been established, trials, prosecutions, everything's happened at a very speedy rate. And although we laud authorities for doing it, the question is, why can't South Africans enjoy that level of security and justice post the World Cup?
Well, I think it's a legitimate question. You suddenly found it able to sort of deliver 40,000 more police person on the street. You couldn't do that when South African corporates and South African citizens were asking for precisely this. And therein lies this broader question. Look, let's not fool ourselves that the World Cup is for a very definite period. It has to be delivered to scale. It has to be delivered on time. It happens only over a month. Democracy, society, governance is a long-running, continuous thing in which is characterized by conflict, by contestation, by competition, all these factors. But that notwithstanding, we've decided on a common basis that these are the things we need to do. You have an overseeing body like FIFA, which holds you accountable for doing certain things. And there's almost a sense that you have a sense of authority which is being conferred upon FIFA, upon our visitors. But you actually start treating South African citizens themselves as lesser grandees, that those who might actually require something much less than what other notable people require. And so people ask this question. You make a U-turn on education policy as we're seeing in the last week. But you were warned about this 10 years ago. Why didn't you take your own citizens seriously?
Okay, there could be an argument that the incumbent administration is just about a year old and have inherited a lot of these problems, even though they're all from the ruling party, but they are finding new ways to address these problems. And some of the successes we've seen in the World Cup, we can safely assume that leaders will apply themselves accordingly on a variety of social issues, service delivery, education, crime, in the way in which we've seen being done in the last month.
Yes and no. Yes, because there are some lessons which you're obviously going to transfer. We've created jobs, we've transferred some skills. We've got a bit more know-how in how to run supply chains. We know how to look at anti-competitive behavior. We know how to spot it. We've learned these lessons. We will apply them. The problem, however, is that unlike the FIFA World Cup, the business of government and the business of governance is a year-long, multi-year, decade-long lifetime experience and enterprise, firstly. Secondly, it's characterized by a degree of competition and conflict. The FIFA World Cup was obviously characterized by consensus, not conflict, not competition. People came together because they had to do certain things. There was someone overseeing them. There is a lesson in this for citizens, and that is, be like FIFA. Come together, organize, define targets, and hold government accountable. not only do you hold a government accountable, there's a flip side to it. There's an oversight mechanism which FIFA very stringently recognized and exploited. They put in place targets and said there are real sanctions and penalties built in. And the threat of sanction and the reality that you will be caught out if you don't deliver on time and to scale, that penalty will be applied.
Okay. Citizen activism on that level. We are taxpayers, we have rights, we could organize, but do we organize effectively when we do it?
No, I think too often it's a negative kind of thing, is that you go in and smash and burn the school up because the school isn't, or you smash and burn the clinic down because of whatever. So it's not a constructive way of doing it, and I think we need, whereas I'm actually quite admirable of citizens getting together and actually taking action. I've got a problem in when you actually do it in a negative, destructive sort of way. You want to build things up, right? School, the government never ever delivered a school and fitted broken windows, not this one, the last one, or the previous one, right? But we need to actually say, right, how can we also empower communities to do it themselves, not to wait for somebody from the government to do things, okay? Because that dependency on government enslaves us. Okay, it really does. It ties up in red tape, and we need to do that. The value of the World Cup helped us to my mind, was a catalyst, because I think before the World Cup came on, we were embroiled in what I call the debating society. If you need a power station, for instance, it's a conference here and a fact-finding mission there, and they've thrown a task team or two, and who knows, if you have enough of those, a power station might miraculously appear from the earth. Now, FIFA wanted a real stadium, not a concept stadium, not a debate about a stadium. All right, they needed a real stadium, etc., and that helped to us catalyze some of the to get us going, and I think it's given us confidence as a nation as well to get the projects done, and that and that's basically the thing.
You're very flippant this afternoon. Okay, what's the responsibility of corporates in this one? Chris says citizens don't just sit back and wait for the government, sometimes take the initiative. And if you look at countries like Nigeria, citizens, corporates have taken the initiative. Where the government didn't build a road, business went out there and did it themselves and said to the government, let's talk about a deal of concessioning this road. That sort of public responsibility by corporate citizens.
Well, I think it's not just corporate citizens that we should focus on. It's those ordinary citizens who are not corporates, who also need to be able to act together and band together in the way that corporates do. I mean, our corporates do so very successfully. When they have to pressure government, they do so incredibly successfully. But it's not just corporates, it's also tax-paying citizens. So you could find citizens who have the ability to actually organize themselves, have the resources to pressure government as a taxpayer union, in fact, do so. They say we'll withhold rates if you don't deliver services to scale and to quality. And they regularly do this. It's those citizens who don't participate as effectively in our society because their material means don't allow it, who are at a particular disadvantage. And those are the ones that Chris, of course, regards as the ones who burn down libraries and schools. Now, unacceptable as that it is, I often think these guys have literally no other way of extracting a level of accountability from those who they view in power far too distant.
Sit up and take notice, right? That's the important thing, because I know it's not always apparent in those communities, but to say a partial absorber, it's just incredible that you have an extremely lavish government at top level and extremely sparse at the bottom. The Director General's office would be superb, but the minions would work in rather awful conditions. It's so often, you cross a border, say going from Zimbabwe or South Africa to Zimbabwe or South Africa to Swaziland, and the Swazi side is bright and cheerful border post, and we've got this dreary, drab prefab buildings here falling apart, and you think, but our officials have to work like that. And we know we can do it because in the Joburg International Airport, even the Department of Home Affairs officials look bright and smart and more upbeat.
Let's just take a final input from you, Ebrahim. Going forward, solutions to social cohesion, solutions to the income disparities and social inequalities we're talking about, and the responsibilities. You know, we have rights which are constitutionally entrenched, but being responsible to those rights.
We certainly aren't. And I think we find that corporates, particularly in our society, and political elites, let's not forget them, who believe that they don't share the same set of responsibilities that those the rest of us do. And I think, you know, the opening comment I made about buying World Cup tickets with taxpayers' money is a particular indicator of this kind of mindset. Now, that's not going to change if we introduce a greater amount of regulation. That can only change if we change the culture. The problem with regulation is that you can always find a circuitous route to finding a hole. When you plug that hole, you'll open another one. And so at some point, we've got to balance the regulatory system with the kind of social culture which exists. The key lesson, I think, for South Africans here is at a social level, let's continue the step of knowing each other. The problem of apartheid, its most parochial legacy has been its most enduring one, and that is we simply don't know what our fellow citizens want, desire, and how they want to do so.